We're live.
Hei, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe Linley, he te pēa. Ai, mihi nui ki a koe hoki, Linley. Okay, so we'll wait a
Kia
few
ora.
minutes. Who you can hear is Peter Ture, the director of Kupe, Voyaging by the Stars. We're still working on a couple of tech workarounds to get his kanohi to join us, but we're working on it. So we've got a few more to join. We're expecting Monique Brown from Kohimarama School. We're expecting Michelle Burstle from Auckland University. We're expecting Vicky Goodlier from St. Therese School. We're expecting Nicola Muir from Kamo High. And to our generous sponsors, the Ray Foundation, we're looking forward to seeing with you and talking with you afterwards as well. Without the Ray Foundation, the Dockage Schools program would not be possible. So we're very, very grateful to them, and as well to Ngā Taonga. This is Ngā Taonga Presents Kupe Voyaging by the Stars. So we're very grateful also to Ngā Taonga for their participation here. And we have our wonderful representative, Lawrence Wharedo. So we will have a few more minutes while we let the people gather. But you might be able to see that Peter will be joining us on camera, hopefully by the end, as we do some tech troubleshooting, and we'll take it from there. But I'll be throwing to Lawrence in just a second, who will open us up with a karakia and open us up with a mihi. So cool. We've got some teachers in the room. So Lawrence, kei a koe te tikanga.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko te mea tuatahi tēnga ni kawana ki a koe e met. Mā tau mihi mai ki a tātou I aru mai ki roto te ruma ipurangi nei mo tēnei kaupapa a Kupe Voyaging by the Stars. He moana puke e eke ngai e te waka. Ko te mea tuatahi ti hei wini, ti hei wana, ti hei nako, ti hei uri, ki putatu ki te whaiau, ki te amarama, a ti hei mauri ora. He mihi tēnei ki te hunga mate koutou o te wahingaro. Tēnei ngā mihi kawana ki o koutou, I te pāpā heke nuku mai, I te pāpā e mau. Me koutou katoa ngā mema o te whānau, o te aurere. Nau mai hoki mai, a wairua mai ki waingani o tātou, ma koutou anō ki te tautoko, ki te manaki, ki te hāpai te kaupapa o te ahiahi nei. Tēnā tātou katoa e hui mai nei, ko Lawrence Wharedo ahau, hei kai whakahaere nako o ngā kaupapa o ngā taonga kei roto o ngā taonga, kia tai atu ki ngā iwi katoa. Nā rea tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, my name is Lawrence Wharedo. I'm a curator at Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision based in Wellington, New Zealand's primary audio-visual archive of film, television and radio. Our job is to collect and protect and then make the content that we have in our collections available to as wide a possible audience. It's both a pleasure and an honour for us to support Doc Edge again this year. We're starting to build up a very comprehensive and, from our perspective, important relationship with Doc Edge. And it is a way that we're able to get, as I say, our content out to as a wide audience as possible. And to hear that we have people in the far north, up in Carmel, right the way through the country is amazing. Normally we would have been having these in cinemas and people would have to come in to that space and have the communal cinema experience. This is a new way of doing things for all of us, I guess. Doc Edge themselves are this new territory for them and certainly for us at Ngā Taonga. Just a brief background to the documentary Kupe Voyaging by the Stars. Teachers, you have your notes here, you would know that in the mid-90s it was a dream for Heke Nuku Mai Ngaiwi Puhipi, or Hector Busby as he is known to others, to respond to the open ocean going canoes that visited from Hawaii and Tahiti. He had the ways and means to be able to do that, and he felt compelled very much for us to retain the celestial navigation knowledge that our ancestors, that Māori Tupuna and Polynesian ancestors had and employed in order to discover Aotearoa New Zealand. As Matt has already said, the director Pita Tude, we're hoping that we'll be able to connect them in for the Q&A session towards the end. Just a few housekeeping matters. I will have all your mics and everything muted, but do take notes during the screening, and there are other ways that we'll be able to back up some of the information that you may need to get access to. We are sort of pressed for time, and I don't want to steal any of the thunder from the film itself. So I'm going to invite everybody to press themselves back, get yourself comfortable. The documentary is about an hour long. It was produced by Ian John and his production team, and directed by Pita Tude. So if you look into the chat box, you should see that a link has been posted to us, and all we need to do there is press go. We can enjoy the documentary. We'll see you back here in about an hour or so, and we'll open up the chat room. We'll have a Q&A session, and we'll just talk about some of the content that you guys want to talk about. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. We'll see you about an hour or so. Kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou katoa. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me, but my first thoughts at this point are to acknowledge Heke Nukumai Ngai Puhipi, Hek Busby, Sir Hek, and Mo Piailung. Both of them have passed. Clay Bertelman from Hawaii, who's also passed, and Glynis Paraha, that beautiful voice you heard in the narration, has also passed. Others I'm not sure of, but hopefully everybody else is still around. Kia ora. Thank you for your mihi, Lawrence. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe Pita.
Tēnā koe e hoa.
Tēnā ngā mihi kawana kia koe e kara. E tautoko hi anau o mihi kia rātaku hi ngā tuku hi ngā mai. I mua tō tāinga mai ki te karanga hau kia rātaku a whakahoki a wairua mai ki te tautoko i a tātou ni tēnei rā. Ana rere tēnā ngā mihi kawana kia koe. I'm not too sure how many people are back in the room or anything like that. But I guess we could just continue just start the conversation anyway. Pita, what in the first instance, what was it that compelled you and Ian, as the producer of the documentary, to record the journey and indeed the whole bringing together of the project?
Well, for me, it started in the forests of Whirinaki with the felling of the tōtara logs for the Hawaii Nui waka, which then went to Pahiatua, and I visited Pahiatua and worked a little bit there, just upping the crew. Really, I was just cleaning out the watercress beds so they could eat rather than working on that waka. And then I caught up with it again when it came to Tamaki and then in Tahiti. And I put a camera on board that waka because when it made its voyage back to Aotearoa, it was under the command of the French, so there was no opportunity for me to go on it and film. But I armed Greg Whakataka Brightwell with a 16mm Bolex, and he used that to record part of that voyage. And so it was very much in my mind. All through those years, I worked with Hek Busby in 1990 on the building of the Mātātua Tūwaka for those celebrations, and I made a film of that. And it was Hek who invited us, because I worked on that with Ian Johns as well, and it was Hek Busby who invited us to film his project to make this waka and voyage to Rarotonga. And of course we were pretty keen on that, and by the time it came to fell the trees, we didn't have any funding or money or anything like that, but we decided to start anyway and to start gathering the footage. in anticipation that one day we might get some funding and we might be able to film the voyage itself.
With respect to the funding and those other issues, I think one of the main points that you just made there was it's a matter of just getting it done. Ahako, whether the money was going to be coming in or not, you felt compelled one way or another that it was important enough to record the event. Besides Hekenuku Mai giving you passage, and how easy or difficult was it to knit in with the rest of the crew?
Knit in with the rest of the crew on the waka. I was always an outsider. I was a guy with the camera, and if you want to go into any room and be accepted as part of the group, having a camera in front of you is not the way to go about it. And this is something you have to navigate as a filmmaker: how to be in the room without disrupting the room, without intimidating people with your camera, and how to capture intimacy without destroying the intimacy you're trying to capture. And so that was tricky. There was a point, Heck asked us to do it. We started doing it. There was a point before the voyage when everybody realized it was going to be real, and then it became very high value stuff in the minds of people. And for a little while, we were excluded from the project. And at the time I said to Heck, look, I understand the first voyage is going to be, special and everything like that. You asked us to make a commitment to film, and we've done that through the felling of the trees, through the construction and the preparation and trials. If you want someone else to film the first voyage, fine. But let us know when we can film a voyage, because that's the film we committed to. And so that sort of went back into their discussions, and so they did decide that we could film the maiden voyage. Even then, it was a little bit touch and go with some of the people on the waka. Didn't really want us on the waka, and so although we departed on the waka, we transferred to the escort ship, which I'd wanted to do anyway, so we could get the ship-to-ship stuff on the ocean. And then we were pretty much excluded from getting back on the waka, except by subversion, coercion, and stealing the boat before dawn when no one was up, and paddling across with our camera gear. So you could say there are difficulties, and there always will be difficulties in all of those realms. One, with being able to be part of it when you're actually filming things, and two, when you're filming something that's really special, there will always be competition.
I mean, you spoke about the intimacy that you need to create with the people that are involved. And for me, probably the most intimate part of that was their departures. Give me a bit of talk us through a little bit about some of the emotions that the crew and whānau that were left on land were dealing with.
Well, that's a really good question. Because being there, the height of that emotion was so extreme. I had been filming already, so they all knew me. I wasn't a stranger. It wasn't like they had television around or anything like that. And because of that, it was comfortable for everybody. I wasn't an interruption anymore. I'd earned my place by then. And so that meant people could allow their grief to be expressed and to be seen, allow their emotion to be seen and expressed. And so it's quite important when you're working with people to do whatever it is you have to do to win trust, so you can be there without being an interruption.
I mean, there are a lot of elements in the film. As you say, you've gone from standing tree to the waka plying the waters for its maiden voyage, which is again that's a bit of a coup to be able to hit the maiden voyage. why, or what are some of the reasons why Hector chose the name Te Aurere, if you're able to answer that?
Oh, it's because that's where he built it. That was his home, and I I wasn't there for any of the discussions around whatever other names might have been for an option. But one of the things I think was behind it was he wanted to establish a school. In those days we were just out in on the dunes by the beach, setting up the star compasses and such like that. But out of that, it was pretty clear that, this vision of a school came about, a school to reinvest ourselves with these ancient traditions, a school with which we could host those people who held the knowledge from the rest of the Pacific, where we could come together and extend our understanding, comprehension, knowledge, and practice of celestial navigation, of ocean wayfinding. And so I'm sure that was part of what was behind putting that name on the waka so that the world would know that Aurere was the source of our reinvestment in those ancient traditions of ocean voyaging in Aotearoa.
And one of the other things I think that are really great about it, Tikana, ko tera te kāinga a Hector, that's Hector's home, then that's it. But there's there's all the other stuff that Sir Hector brings to the story, and that's all the his engineering and his bridge building capacity. How important was that and his access to construction equipment? How valuable was that in terms of creating the waka in the first instance, but also then being able to pass on the knowledge that he'd gained over time from Mao and Nainua?
Well, the other waka projects I'd worked on were all dependent on funding, whereas Heck wasn't waiting for any Arts Council grant or anything else, really. He was go to and do it. Because he'd been a bridge builder for so long, he had a lot of good heavy machinery, being bulldozers, front end loaders, and such like that. So it was no problem for him to pick up a hull or to pick up the finished waka for that matter and take it down to the beach. He wasn't waiting for anybody else. And that is because he had the resources of his space where he lived out at Aurere, the resources of his toolkit left over from being a bridge builder for 40 or 50 years or whatever. And as well as the toolkit, he also had people around him who were used to moving heavy things, who were used to working hard, who were anchored in those deeply rooted traditions of we can get it done with what we've got. And that goes back to Piri Poutapu, and Heck always acknowledged Piri Poutapu, who came up with the puia, and worked with others of the north on the construction of Ngā Toki Matawhaurua, and which features in another film called Manawaka. And in that film, you can see when they go into the bush and they haven't got heavy machinery, there's a big hill in the way, and two men uh, pick up spades and start digging, and they just dig a track through that hill so that the oxen can drag the logs out. So he came from that sort of attitude. And although he had machines and everything else, it was attitude really was probably his strongest tool, because there was nothing that was going to stop him.
In the doco, Nainua talks about Hector being compelled to do this. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. He was compelled, but he had patience. He'd wanted to do this for decades. He had the patience to wait until he could line up all of the elements and then embark on the project. And of course, one of those elements was a destination. a destination that was the South Pacific Arts Festival. It was in Rarotonga, so it was the perfect opportunity to put ourselves back on the ocean in the fellowship of our Pacific whānau, who would all be voyaging from their home islands to arrive in Rarotonga. And so we had that hui and reiatea. You see that at the start of the film. And yeah, so that all of those things ripened into an environment where he could follow his desires to achieve that goal, and he did.
I mean, he was responsible also for getting Tuki Matawhātua back onto the water 34 years after its maiden voyage in Waitangi 1940. And his interest in waka had built and built and built from there. Then with the arrival of Hawaii Nui with Greg Hokataka Brightwell in 1986, and then a little later with Hopu Lea, that just tended to really start ramping things up for Hector. Why did it take him so long between the arrivals of Hawaii Nui and the Hokalea to sort of get moving on with the project that he was doing? Was he waiting for the tide, the moon, and the stars to be in the right position for him to do that? Or was it a matter of just him having to wait for resourcing?
I think the only indicator I have on that, I don't think he's waiting for stars or anything like that. What he was waiting for was how to pressure the Crown to let him have those trees. And at the time, they didn't want anybody going in that forest because they'd been pulling out trees without proper authority anyway, and they didn't want anyone to see that. And so I think that gave him the leverage for them to let him take 2 trees. I think it was waiting for the raw materials, which at the time was still under Crown control.
How important was it for Papa Hek to go to Tahiti to Rangiati in the first instance to gather that story that he's sharing with the women up on the hill, on the edge of the crater there? How important was that for him?
It wasn't just that it was important for him, and it was important for him, but what made it important is that it was important for everybody to re-anchor ourselves. You know, we're reinvesting ourselves in these traditional voyaging techniques where, as Māori, we're reinvesting ourselves in our relationship with Tangaroa. And so that was hugely important. I mean, where do we start that? Reiatea was the place to start that. And so in many ways, and I tried to show this in the film, Hek was driven by those whakatauki and those whakatauaki to provide the guidance, and they do, and they did. And so from our perspective in Aotearoa, Reiatea was the place. But from the Pacific whānau, Reiatea was the place. And so it became more important in its layers of connection for all of us. And so if we all started in that place of spiritual connection, went back home, started on our voyage, it kind of gave a connection to the spiritual context of it, to the metaphysical context of it, to the context where, as Māori, we were going to acknowledge tāna mahuta and then commit ourselves here of Tangaroa. And that was a big thing in itself. So we needed that. We needed that anchor. We needed that spiritual anchor.
I mean, talking about, in terms of authority on board, now there was a choice for them. They didn't listen to the navigator. And there was a point there where the crew was ready to mutiny, going to mutiny. What was some of the things that saved it besides the boys supporting Miles' decision to head north?
Okay, I don't believe there was ever going to be a mutiny. There was a bit of grumbling, and you'll always get that on a ship anyway. But the decision to believe Kiri Kiri Radio, who was the trusted source of weather information for navigators for decades, but they got it wrong one day, and they contradicted everything everything that Mo had identified for us in terms of how to avoid a storm that we couldn't see, but he could tell it was coming straight at us. And because it contradicted what Kitty Radio was saying, the other element in it was the decision to voyage with an escort boat. And the escort boat, they were part of that conversation, and they were, firm believers in Kitty Kitty Radio, as every sailor is. And so they influenced that decision as well. And so it wasn't really until we got a hiding for 4 days that we woke up to the fact that Kitty Kitty, and also Kitty Kitty Radio radioed back and apologized for getting it wrong before being asked to. And it was really at that point that we came back to give credence to what Mo Pialung, our traditional navigator, was trying to tell us. And so in a way, sometimes you learn lessons like that. And so everybody learnt that lesson. But we paid for it. And we paid for it by extending our voyage for a few days longer than we really needed to. And also for getting a hiding in that storm. Interestingly, we were accompanied by 2 albatross. And when we stopped listening to Mo, the albatross went. When we, after the storm, and we came back on course, and so we did what Mo had advised us to do. Once we did that, then we did see the albatross again, but it was at dawn, and they were just sitting in the ocean, and they were sitting way up ahead. I couldn't tell what they were at first, but then as we came alongside, they were just sitting there looking at us, and then we passed them, and then they flew up ahead again, and they sat there. We passed them again while they looked at us, and then they made their departure. And within a day, I think, maybe 2 days, then we saw a frigate bird. And so we knew we were near land.
So, I mean, those are some of the lessons that we've learned. I mean, I know Greg Whakataka Brightwell talks about the bird life and all that sort of thing, increasing as they got closer to land. But with respect to lessons, the Learning Centre at Taurere has received funding. Do you know where things are at this point with the School of Learning that's set up at Taurere?
I actually don't, I'm sorry to say. Yeah, no, I'm not sure where it is. I mean, I haven't been up there after Heck's passing, so I don't know. I don't know who's picked up the mantle for that, but I do know from that waka voyage, there were individuals on that waka who really have picked it up and who are providing the continuum of the growth of knowledge in those fields, in particular Jack Thatcher, Piripi, Conrad. But yeah, there's a growing crew of people who are devoted to maintaining those traditions.
I do know that Taturangi Nepia Clamp he's continued with his work in Gisborne. We know that Stan Conrad and Jack Thatcher have been given the honour as Master Celestial Navigators. Is there, or do we get a sense that there's still an appetite for this for this sort of voyaging? You know, I mean, I'm looking at the stuff that Hoturo Kerr is doing at the moment and other waka that have been built.
Appetite's a good word. There is definitely an appetite. There's a growing appetite, hunger, a thirst, a demand. There is, it's just becoming bigger and bigger. And so what we're doing in Tamaki, which is my rohe, is we're working out how to prepare to welcome 20 ocean voyaging waka from the Pacific. And we're making sure that's an inclusive consideration in all of the planning for all of our waterfront projects and such like that, and looking at, okay, how do we welcome them, and then where do we host them? So those sorts of things are deeply entrenched in our thoughts and in our planning these days, and I imagine they are in Turanganui Kiwa and Tauranga Moana and Kawhia and every other place as well. You know, we've had the experience of seeing what this means. We know we're voyagers again now. We know we're part of a family of voyagers that includes all of our whanaunga from Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and every other part of the Pacific. And so we know our future is going to be signposted with events that will be the departure of and the arrival of waka who have covered vast distances to get here. And we will welcome them in due accordance with our traditions and with the status we want to afford them for maintaining those traditions with us.
Look, I'm aware that we're sort of closing in very quickly on the length of the session, that we will be finishing in probably about 5 minutes. I just do want to draw teachers' attention to the fact that in the chat, if you have a quick question there, Peter and I could take a look at that. Otherwise, if nothing's going to come through, I'll probably go towards wrapping things up, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't appear to be getting any questions coming in. So that suggests sort of one of two things to me. Either A, we've had a really good conversation and they're locked in and we've given them everything that they need to know, or they may have already left. But I think I'm...
Hey, Lawrence.
Oh, sorry, hang on. Nei, could cope up Mario te moana. That was it there. Tēnā koe, Linley. Mā tō mihi mai kia māho pita, me te kaupapa nei. He mihi kauana ki o koutou te kura kaupapa o Puao te moana nui, a kiwa. He oi no. Okay. Just give it another minute or two, Peter.
Well, while we're waiting for that minute or two, I just want to acknowledge Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision for maintaining this film and all of the others so that they are available and they are accessible to be screened in schools, libraries, wherever else, and also to acknowledge Doc Edge, not only for showing my film, but thank you, but also just for doing the thing of keeping documentary, our consciousness of documentary, our awareness of what documentaries people are making alive, and keeping this annual event and giving the opportunities for documentary makers to talk to their work, because it's a very valuable thing, and it means we aren't controlled by whatever multinational corporations there are that control our broadcasting and such like that. And so a big salute to both of you. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, kia ora, Peter. Just to follow up on that, that's one of the that is one of our main functions, is to look after this material and make it available. I also want to tautoko what you've said about Doc Edge and them giving access to audiences, new audiences for this material. And I think that there is a place for archival film in a documentary festival, if not to see how far we've moved, in some cases maybe how far we haven't moved in terms of society. and building a dual nation that we are. Te mea tuatahi he anau ki te mihi atu ki Dock Edge. Kia koe hoki, kia koe te tuatahi e kare pita. Mā tō haringa mai tō whakae ki te noho tahi, ki te whakawhituwhiti kōre whakaro hoki e pāna ki tēnei kaupapa mō te aurere mō Kupe Voyaging by the Stars. Kia kūtau o Dock Edge, tēnei mihi koe ni kia kūtau. Me rātou o Ray Foundation, mā te tautoko ki tēnei kaupapa Dock Edge, mā ngā kura. So I just want to further to also support what you've said there, Peter, and to graciously accept what you've said. The work that we do, this is what it's about. We are searching for new ways in this new world that we're living in post-COVID. So I want to acknowledge Dock Edge. Formerly, we probably would have been sitting in a cinema, but I said earlier, you know, we've got a spread from Carmel in the north right through the country. And so in some ways, we had a really good opportunity that our audience has grown. And from our perspective in Ngā Taonga, that's a great thing. Hoi anō, I te timatanga ki te mihi au, ki te karanga hau ki a rātou kua hingātu o te wāhingaro. Te hoki a mai ki te tautoki a tātou, Pāpā Hek, Pāpā Mao, Glynis, wete hei atu o ngā tāngata e pāna ki te kaupapa nei, rātou kua hingātu kua hinga mai. Nā reira koutou mā, haere koutou ki tū o Paira, whakahoki koutou ki roto o Hawaiki Nui, Hawaiki Ro, Hawaiki Pāmamau, ka reira koutou hakarere e kainga tuturu o mātou mata tangata. Hoi no koutou ki a koutou apiti hono tātai hono, te hunga mate ki te hunga mate. Ka piti hono tātai hono, ko tātai te hunga hui mai nei tēnei wā. Tēnei ngā mihi kawana ki a tātou katoa, ki a koe e pita e kara, me te tīma o Dock Edge, nei rā ngā mihi no mātou o ngā taonga, tēnā kūtau a kia ora hui mana tātou katoa.